In April 2025, I went to Utah for the first time, and I went to three different national parks in Utah. And I have to admit, I hyped up Bryce Canyon a bit much. I really only made a pit stop there, but you'll still see some pictures, and I really want to get back there. But just to give some context, this trip was made possible through professional development funds from my previous position, which is where I was about a year ago. I was working with the Delaware Water Gap National Park Service. My position was called a Community Volunteer Ambassador, or CVA, and this position was run by a nonprofit organization called Conservation Legacy, which is who I have up on the left in that picture there. They're really awesome. They like ran this whole internship really well, and they really supported um me as a community volunteer ambassador. I also had about 20 other community volunteer ambassadors in my cohort, is what they called it. And we were all placed at different National Park Service sites throughout the entire country. Um, and we all kept in touch with each other, even though we were at such different sites, like so far apart from each other, which was really nice because it helped me learn about what they were doing and what their parks were like. And so through Conservation Legacy, we were given professional development funds. And this year, 2025, we had quite a lot of professional development funds. And so me and some other community volunteer ambassadors in the Northeast Region National Park Service sites decided to use our professional development funds and visit parks out west and to visit our fellow community volunteer ambassadors at Zion and Capitol Reef National Parks to get a sense of how they operated. So this trip is really interesting because it doesn't look like your typical trip to Zion or Capitol Reef. We didn't really do as much hiking as you would expect to do during these trips, since we wanted to balance exploration an adventure with career skill building activities. So we had a packed schedule of talking with different Park Service staff, exploring volunteer programs, and also learning about the differences between backcountry and front country National Park Service sites. So it was a really interesting visit. And it was nice because I feel like I got to have kind of a like you got to look behind the curtain and see how things were running, which you might not get if you're just going to enjoy the national park sites as on your vacation or as a tourist. And so this picture on the right is of me at the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area back when I worked there. It was a lot of fun. And I got to pose next to Smokey, so that's pretty cool. So this was a multi-day trip. It was about 7 days. Lots of driving and travel in between. But what we did was we landed, me and about five other people, by the way. We landed in Salt Lake City. We all got in a rental car together and we drove down to Zion National Park. And then we spent a few days at Zion. And then we had a travel day where we made a pit stop at Bryce Canyon. And then we continued on and spent a couple more days at Capitol Reef National Park, which was a super tight schedule. And honestly, you could spend so much time at all of these places. And I definitely want to go back. So, to save costs, because this was a professional development funded trip, we camped in the parks, which was really fun. Here's our setup at Zion National Park. We camped at the Watchman campground. That mountain on the left is the Watchman. It's called the Watchman, hence the name of the campground. This sandstone mountain is 6,500 feet tall, but about 785 feet above the surrounding landscape. So that's why it doesn't look like a 6,500-foot mountain from the picture here. But anyway, these were our tents. This was a really nice campground. Something that really struck me about Zion National Park was just how like developed it was. It like some people around me compared it to a theme park, which I would maybe wouldn't go that far because it definitely still had its natural like wildness about it, but it definitely was like one of the more developed national parks I've ever been to, which was really interesting. You could see how popular and special this place was. And so on our first day, we volunteered with Zion's vegetation crew, which was a lot of fun. Zion has a pretty substantial native plant program, which we got to tour and help do some weeding in their plots. So they have a greenhouse and a plot of multiple plots of land where they collect seeds and grow native plants in a protected environment. And then they use these plants to revegetate the landscape. In 2023, for example, park biologists collected seeds from 36 different species, and over the course of the year, 500 pounds of seeds were gathered and grown. On the left is a refrigerated shed that they keep the seeds in for longevity. So that was pretty cool, taking a peek in there. And then on the right, I'm forgetting what this plant is, but it's one of the native plants that they grew from seed. And then here's a couple more pictures of the greenhouse and their land plots where they're growing these native species. And on the right is where we were doing the weeding. That's a picture of me getting in there and some more plants. And what really struck me was like, imagine you're going to work to like do some weeding and, all this like heavy labor stuff. And then you look up and like that's your view in the picture on the right. Like that's pretty nice. I couldn't believe it every time I looked up. It's pretty cool. Um, After checking out their native plant program, we headed over to the visitor center. That's a picture of me and the group I was with. And there I saw a roadrunner, which is in the right, which is pretty cool. I never realized how small they actually were. I definitely was misguided from the comics with the coyote and the roadrunner. I thought it would be a lot bigger, but no, they're quite small and pretty cute. This was something on the left that I thought was pretty cool. It was a table that they had outside of the visitor center. It showed you like the topography of the landscape, and it helped give you some perspective about like where you were and how tall the surrounding mountains were beside you. It was really cool. And then, of course, I had to buy a bighorn sheep hat from the visitor center. Bighorn sheep live in Zion. I did see a bighorn sheep in my during my trip. I did not get a picture of it, tragically, but that was definitely a bucket list moment checked off for me. After stopping at the visitor center, we went and had lunch outside of Zion Lodge. And then there we learned about the formation of the canyon that we were in. We talked about the different rocks, the rock layers from the earlier Moenkopi Formation, which was the bottom of a shallow sea, to the Kayenta mudstone layer, which has dinosaur tracks. And then the next picture I have shows like these different layers. The geology here is just incredible. I have so many pictures of rocks, as you will see. Um, I can't help it. They're amazing. But yeah, so this is pretty cool. From the Zion Lodge, we continued on to the grotto, where we saw a wild turkey hanging out. That was pretty fun. And then we continued on to a place called the Temple of Sinawava, which is this naturally made open amphitheater. This is there's this really cool rock formation, like in the middle of the amphitheater. And as I was taking pictures, I realized that there was actually somebody climbing on it. So you can see the little arrow. And then there were people up top, waiting for them. So that was really cool. Also very brave. I'm not a rock climber. I was a little nervy watching them climb, but it was really amazing. And then I have to say, like, so we came in April, which I felt was a pretty good time to go because it wasn't too crazy. And also, like, the temperature was bearable. It was like 80. And then at night, it did get a little cold. It was probably around like 40 camping, but it was still very manageable. And I was more than happy to avoid like really high temperatures. And it was such a sunny, beautiful day. Um, that the trees in Zion, like they really like glowed. It's such an interesting like this neon sparkling green. I like you really can't capture it in photos. You really have to see it in person. The way the sun just shined through them was pretty amazing. Yeah, more pictures of the trees. And then again in this amphitheater area still like just looking up at the walls of the canyon around you and seeing all the trees in the distance, it really was so beautiful. And then it was cool to see on the photo on the left, again still in the amphitheater area, the native cacti growing. I'd never been in a desert before, so like in a desert climate area, so it was super cool to see that. And then on the right, this is just like a close-up of one of the walls on the of the canyon, just to see like how water shaped the rock. So interesting. So, from the Temple of Sinawava, you can access the Riverside Walk, which is super popular and definitely worth checking out. And also, it leads to the Narrows, which is a hike you can do where you walk through the river, through the canyon, which is really popular. We didn't have time to do the walk through the Narrows, but it was funny. You could tell who was doing it because like there were these like galoshes you could rent. And so people would be, you know, full body like overall galoshes that they'd be wearing as they walked through the Riverside Walk. And it was like again, this was a hot day. It was like in the 80s, but I really felt bad for everyone who had to walk with those things on because they were like heavy duty rubber. But then when I felt the temperature of the creek, I was like, okay, that is definitely needed. It was so cold. There were also a lot of chipmunks who really wanted food. So they had to put that sign up there, which I thought was funny. And then the creek, like not the creek, the river, it's the Virgin River, was this really beautiful color, like this like glowing teal with the sun. It was really gorgeous. Another picture of the river from the Riverside Walk. And then of course we had to take a break and hang out in the river. And again, it was freezing cold. Some of the people I was with did go fully under, which was very impressive. Uh, but yeah, it was gorgeous. And then some more views as we're heading back to our car. We did the Riverside Walk to about where the Narrows entrance began, and then we turned back. Um, and then from there, we got in the car and went on the Zion Mount Carmel Highway. We went through a tunnel and it took us to the east of the main stretch of Zion Canyon. And it was really amazing because you go through this dark tunnel and then you pop out and you're like in like literally these two photos was like the first thing you see, which was really cool. I also was able to smell my first Ponderosa pine. If you have not heard of Ponderosa pine, they have like this amazing, like warm, sweet scent to them, which is incredible. We pulled off to the side of the road around this dry, sandy riverbed area. And so that's where I was able to see the Ponderosa pine tree. And I would say that it smells like if you've ever smelled like a freshly made waffle cone at an ice cream shop, which is a very specific scent, but that's what it smelled like to me. And I wish I could like get a candle of that because it was so good. And these are just some more of like the really cool like striation patterns of the rocks in the canyon. So gorgeous. And then in this area, I also learned about crust. So these are cryptobiological crust, which you can see off the trail throughout Zion. It's made up of lichens, moss, bacteria, and fungi. They're super important to the ecosystem here because they keep the ground from eroding, and they also provide nutrients to other plants in this really like zero nutrient landscape. These ones were really small. They were probably about the size of like a little bit bigger than a quarter. So these are like close-up photos. But yeah, this is where I learned it's really important to stay on the trail in places, on parks and trails in general, but especially here because it is so easy to destroy this crust, and it's so much harder for them to form. It takes 5 years for crust to mature, which is really interesting. But yeah, I thought that was so cool. And then here's like the sandy riverbed that we were walking in. It was really neat because like you could see in this next set of photos the curves of the walls of the sandstone. Like you could just really see how water shaped the landscape. Uh, it's so beautiful. Really never had seen anything like that before. And then we came up from the riverbed and went up this hillside, this sandstone hillside. Um, Really gorgeous. Again, like the rock formations have such an interesting shape to them. On the left is some more really interesting lichen that was growing on one of the rock formations. On the right is another picture of us on top of the hill that we're on. Here's a view from the hill that we were on. Really beautiful. Another photo. Just everywhere you look was stunning, which is incredible. And then these were like some of the really cool rock formations that we had walked up to that were on that hill. Just really cool. Such interesting shapes. And then here's another view from that hill. And then we went back to the campground. I will say there were a lot of deer at at the Watchman campground. I think they're definitely looking for food and maybe have had a few too many people feeding them. And these are actually mule deer, and you can tell because their ears are a lot bigger than normal deer. Some of them had really big ears. These ones look a little bit more normal, but yeah, they were pretty scraggly looking. I think they were still growing out from their winter coats. But you had to be really good about making sure you don't leave food in your tent. Okay, that was our last time in Zion. And so that meant we were on the road for about 4 hours to Capitol Reef National Park. Capitol Reef National Park is between Escalante and Moab, Utah. Um, and so it was a really gorgeous drive, and Bryce Canyon is right between the two. So we did do a little pit stop in Bryce Canyon. I wish we had more time to spend like so much more time here. Um, but we really had to get to where our other community volunteer ambassador was stationed at Capitol Reef. We didn't know anybody who worked here, so we couldn't get a special tour. But it was really beautiful. I can't remember exactly where we stopped. It was either Sunrise Point or Sunset Point. And it was beautiful. Like I have never seen rock formations like this. Yeah, really gorgeous. And then of course we did have to stop at the visitor center really quick. And I really like this sign. Have a Bryce day. And then back on the road. But yeah, like I said, it was really interesting because we drove through so many different landscapes and we went up in elevation, down in elevation. Like here we're driving more through like a desert type landscape. And then we went up in elevation to like this forested area. And also there was snow on the ground, which I thought was really cool because we were coming from less than an hour or two away, in 80-degree weather. And now we're going up this mountain and there's snow on the side of the road. And again, this was early April. And then we made it to Capitol Reef. Uh, this is me and the group at this entrance sign. I have to say that Capitol Reef was definitely, I think, my favorite between Zion and Capitol Reef. It was so much less busy than Zion, but still just as beautiful. Although Zion is a special place, I have to admit that. but it was really gorgeous. And you could spend, again, like so much time here. Um, and you would never run out of things to do. This is where we set up. We camped in Fruita, right next to a creek, and also they have a horse farm here, which was really cool. So I set my tent up right next to the to the fence to the horses. And again, like you just have this gorgeous view when you step out of the tent. It doesn't feel real. And then here's like a moody picture that I took at night, the same feature. I have to say one of the best parts of of Capitol Reef is the Gifford House. So right next to where we camped, there's this 1900s homestead called the Gifford House. And today it's a gift shop that sells locally baked pies, which were delicious. They usually sell out before noon, and there was always a line, like whenever we looked over there. Um, and they're open between March and November. Yeah, they were so good. This is the mixed berry pie that I got. I did not get a cinnamon roll, and I will forever regret it. Uh, but they were delicious. Uh, Let me see. Uh-oh, where'd my screen go? Okay. So then we did our next volunteer activity, where we went to the historic orchards of Fruita, and helped dig out the irrigation trenches in those orchards. A little bit of history about Fruita. It was founded in 1880 by a group of Mormons, and it was ultimately known for its large orchards there. They grew all kinds of fruit. The town was abandoned in 1955 when the National Park Service purchased it to be included in Capitol Reef National Park. And so what we did here was we got in the mud. There was a lot of mud, and we worked to irrigate water to these trees that were planted. Um, it was really cool because I actually found a piece while we're digging in those trenches of old pottery. I don't know how old it was, but it was a really neat find. And so, of course, I did not take it. But I was instructed to put it with their other findings. So there was like a big pile of pottery that they had dug up while working in these irrigation trenches. So that was pretty cool. After that, we went on a hike to go see some petroglyphs. Um, I'm gonna be honest, I do not remember where this hike was. I think it might have been Pleasant Valley. Um, but yeah, I was at this point I was tired out from the irrigation digging. But it was still really cool. It was a really nice hike. There were a lot of cacti around us. You can see some on the bottom of the picture on the right here. So I really had to be careful where I stepped and make sure I did not trip. I'm not used to having that problem on hikes. We saw so much like old-timey graffiti. This isn't graffiti, but like so much etched into the rocks on this hike, which was really cool. This is Elliot Byrd, who was a US surveyor, and he left a little mark here that he was here in November of 1921, which was such a cool thing to find. So there's like history all over the place here, even when it looks so um it's like so natural and wild and uninhabited, you can still find things like this. Before we got to the petroglyphs, we stopped in this cool little canyon. So you can see us walking towards the canyon in the picture on the right. And then here's some pictures of us inside the canyon. Again, this was like so cool. I have never been in like had never been in a canyon like this before. Um, this picture on the right really gives you perspective. It was like this U-shaped uh like amphitheater that we were in, which was really cool. And then again, I can't stop looking at like all of the marks on the rock that have eroded away from like water that once streamed in here. It's really, really cool. Some more photos, the same area. So many little details to look at. And then we continued on, and here's some more old-timey graffiti. This is C. Euler, um, who was I believe it was a woman who made this. And there's like this story, there's this love story, I think, about the people who wrote this graffiti. So it was really cool to like be able to see this person's name, and then you can go look them up, and they were this historic figure who lived here a long time ago. This is someone named Jed Herbert in 1931 wrote this on the wall. And then now we found some more petroglyphs. So these were likely made between the years 300 and 1300 AD. They were made by the ancestors of the modern Hopi, Zuni, and Paiute tribes. Um, so this was pretty cool. This one here is like a series of like spirals. And then this one you can see, it's hard to see, but you can see up top there's some like English graffiti made by people in the past. I believe it's 1916 they were there. And then on the bottom you can see the some of the petroglyphs made by the indigenous people 1,000 years ago. You can see there's like a little man figure right in the middle of the bottom, which is pretty cool. Here's a zoom in of that English language graffiti. September 24th, 1916. Super interesting. And then here's some more of the indigenous petroglyphs. There's like a bighorn sheep in the middle, which is pretty cool. I was a fan of that one. And then this is like a spiral, like a bullseye. And you could actually see like gunshots, like someone came up to here and shot it. And I think it wasn't modern, it was old gunshots. And then you can also see faintly there's two like figures of a man, like a light colored figure of a man and then a darker colored figure of a man to the right of the bullseye. And then here's a close-up of those petroglyphs. And then here's some more petroglyphs. These ones are hard to see, but I think they looked like figures of people with some kind of like headwear on, and then more spirals too. And then here's a another looks like a person potentially. And then on the right too, you can see a handprint, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and then this is us making our way back. We passed over this really beautiful creek. It was very nice to walk through on a hot day, I will say. And then the next day, we ended up doing a backcountry like road trip through Capitol Reef. We spent all day driving around a rugged four-wheel drive road and stopped at different interesting locations. I think this was one of my favorite days because I had never really done any four-wheel driving before, and it really felt adventurous and really cool, especially getting to see like uh, places that are hard to get to, that many people don't always have access to. I thought that was pretty interesting. This was a beautiful rock feature. That was one of the first things that we saw. Um, so the route we took is called Looping the Fold. If you ever are interested or want to do it yourself, and it's called that because the route follows a loop around a geographic feature that makes up the park. And this feature is a wrinkle in the Earth's crust that's called the Water Pocket Fold. So if you ever want to do a really cool four-wheel drive road trip that shows you some really interesting things, you can look up Looping the Fold at Capitol Reef. So one of our first stops were at these this like section of sandstone that had fossilized oysters in the rock. This like blew my mind. It was amazing. There were hundreds of these like fossilized oyster shells, just like they looked like they were like you just like picked up some oysters from like the ocean itself and put them in these rocks. But they were solidly stuck in there. So this is the Dakota Formation, which is a marine layer of rock from when there was an ocean over here. So yeah, just really, really cool. And they're like so clearly oyster shells, which is amazing. And then just here's some more like beautiful scenery from the drive. And then we stopped at this trailhead that led to an area called the Cottonwood Tanks or the Cottonwood Wash, if you want to look it up. We were in the backcountry, so they had this box where people put information about themselves to make sure, you know, if you didn't come back on time, someone would know. Um, which was a little intimidating, but we were with a good guide, so we were okay. But the cottonwood tanks were these like pools of water along the sandstone hillside, and the pools w would stay filled with water even in the summer, in the heat of the summer, which was pretty interesting. And so this is our hike to the cottonwood tanks, and then we started seeing some water. It was pretty sandy and dry most of the way there. And then here we started to see them. And so in the right picture, all the way up this hill, there's these like pools. And it's really interesting because they looked so hidden until you like got up higher. And then here's a video. Let's see if it works. Yeah, so just to give you an idea of the landscape. Um really, really cool. It was like these little mini oases like in the desert. And the water would stream down from the pools on these lines, which is really interesting. Here's another video. It was cool to see like just how adaptable the landscape was because, you know, right at the pools there would be like so much greenery. And then you would go away from the water like not even very far and it would go back to being desert. So really interesting. Here's another view from the same area, just like the rock patterns and the vegetation here. And then on our way back from the hike on the from the cottonwood tanks, we saw this surveyor's mark, this metal surveyor's mark like hammered into the rock, which was pretty cool. Just another really beautiful scenery. At this point we got back in the car and started driving again. Here's one of my favorite pictures, 'cause you can see the road like zigzagging all the way through. These are called where we're at. We just drove through the Burr Trail switchbacks, which took us all the way from that road in the distance to up top of a mountain. In this picture, it's hard to get a sense really of how high we went up, but the switchbacks are like crazy narrow and like pretty steep. So I was definitely glad I wasn't driving at this point, because it was definitely a little intimidating. But it was really cool, and it gave you such a good view. And then we went to an area called the Singing Canyon. So it was really interesting because like you can see how different like this is such a different landscape than this like deep red canyon that we're now in, and it really wasn't too far apart from each other. But yeah, so this area is called the Singing Canyon. And it's this really cool like canyon that you can walk through for a good amount of time. And it kind of leads you to a spot where it echoes a bit, which is why it's called the Singing Canyon, because it has, good acoustics. But yeah, it just was really beautiful. And then we headed back to Fruita. And the kind of one of the last things that we did in Capitol Reef was we learned more about the history of the orchards and the types of fruit they grew here, which was pretty cool. These are pear trees, I believe. And then here's another pear tree and a cherry tree. So they have really cool orchards that they keep up through the modern day, these historic orchards. So that was a nice way to end it. And then I have a video. My coworker at the time made a nice little recap video to share with Conservation Legacy. So I'll show that to you guys now. Let me see. I think I have to make sure that I can share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can all see this. But I will play. Let me just restart that. Yeah. And then I'll go back to here. And that's my Utah